Well, it's that time already. Just a couple of days ago, I did answer a Storyworth question, and I'm going to do one now. The question that I got now was, what was it like learning how to drive? So, put on my famous reflective glasses, and I'll read what I answered, and I'll embellish a little bit. So, I believe that living in the country made it easier for me to learn how to drive. Our house was on a country road that didn't get much traffic at all. It could literally be an hour between cars. I mean, maybe even more. We could play out in the street and hardly have to worry about anything. So, wasn't far from town, but we were out in the country. The road was maybe 3/4 of a mile long. When I was young, I remember my parents pulling over to the side of the road and asking if I wanted to sit on their lap and steer for that 1/4 of a mile from the one road to our house. It wasn't very often. It was probably only a few times, but I thought it was a big deal. Looking back on it, things were really a different time back then. It wasn't unusual for us to ride for miles in the bed of a truck, and there weren't car seats or seat belts. Well, there were seat belts, but they were rarely used. And Brad actually fell out of the car once. I don't think I was steering or driving. Matter of fact, I'm sure I'm not. We were moving really slow, but he fell out of the car. Times have changed a little bit, right? When I was about 14, I would occasionally be allowed to drive for that little short stretch home. I remember there were 2 guidelines. I wasn't to drive faster than 20 miles an hour, and I had to stop on the road if for some strange reason another car was to appear. At first I was really nervous, but after several times of doing it, I'd actually ask if I could drive. This part of the road was relatively straight, and there was only one slight curve, one over to the left, maybe 30-degree bend, right? So steering was pretty easy. Plus, I'd been a steerer for a few years, sitting on the laps. Pulling into the driveway, though, that was a different situation. That skill was learned with the words "turn, turn, turn, turn" coming from the seat beside me, and somehow I never hit the mailbox. I remember mom and dad pulling the wheel because I wasn't turning far enough, helped me make it into the driveway. And we had a long enough driveway, probably 6 car lengths, so I would just pull in and stop, and then they would actually park wherever, so as not to run into something. So these early experiences allowed me to be relatively calm when I first got my permit. See, at that point, you didn't get your permit till you were 16, not 15 and a half like today, so it was winter when I got my permit. My driving classes were at the Eastwood Mall, and I went with my best friend, Bo Wortman. We did everything together, and we thought we were really cool going to these classes, right? So our in-car hours were with an instructor named Kim. We both thought she was really beautiful. She was young. I mean, she was in her 20s, I'm thinking, right? Little side story about her. I've told Lori this in the past. I remember we were driving one time. I don't remember if I was in the back or if I was driving. And she asked us, now we're 16. She asked us, have you ever had a slow, comfortable screw up against the wall? We were like, what? It's not as bad as it sounds, or maybe it is, I'm not sure. She's like, oh yeah, that is a slow gin, Southern Comfort, and orange juice. And I don't know what the wall was Harvey Wallbanger. I don't know, it was some mixed drink. So, I mean, she's my driving instructor. I'm 16, she's telling me this. But I'm not going to attest whether we ever partook of that drink or not. Definitely not until I was 21. So, the events of the day, or about a month later, I went to get my license. So it's in January, right? And the events of that day are still with me. I missed one question on the written test, and that question was, when is a school zone speed limit in effect? That's paraphrased, but there were several answers. It was multiple choice, and I picked 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. because that made the most sense. They had like 24 hours a day, all the time. I think 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. And the correct answer was during restricted hours. I still maintain that's not an answer. Not an answer at all. So the driving portion went well because I'd been at least steering since I was young and driving a little bit on the road, and then had my time with the driving instructor. It went really well until it was time for the cones. Like I said, it was cold. It was a cold January, like it was today. It was 0 when I went to work today, so it was freezing cold, windy. But I couldn't wait. I had to go get my license, and we were set up behind this old decrepit plaza. The parking lot was full of potholes and ice. I mean, they tore this plaza down since then. Actually, half of the stores went out not long after this time, and now it's just a big flat open spot. So the parking lot, like I said, was full of potholes and ice, and I'm doing my maneuverability around the cones, and I slid into a cone. I was devastated, and I knew I'd have to take the test again. And then the driving instructor, some old guy, probably way younger than I am now, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, we need to really set these up somewhere else." I would have slid into that too. And I left with my license that day. So that was the story of me learning how to drive, and it was pretty fun, actually. All right, I'll talk to you later.